Everyone telling you to raise your vibration is giving you the wrong instructions. Think positive, practice gratitude, meditate more, surround yourself with high-frequency people, cut out negativity, and you've tried all of it. You've done the affirmations, the breath work, the journaling, the visualization boards. You've forced yourself into positivity until your jaw ached from smiling through pain you weren't allowed to acknowledge. And nothing shifted. Not really. Maybe a temporary high, a few good days, a burst of momentum that collapsed the moment life got heavy again. Because what they're teaching you about vibration isn't just incomplete, it's backwards. Carl Jung discovered something about human energy that the entire spiritual marketplace has either ignored or deliberately buried. He found that the people who radiated the most transformative presence, the ones whose reality seemed to bend around them, who attracted circumstances and people that defied probability, weren't the ones performing positivity. They were the ones who had gone into the darkest parts of themselves and come back whole. Their power didn't come from avoiding low vibration. It came from integrating everything they'd been taught to reject. And that integration created a frequency so authentic, so complete, that reality had no choice but to reorganize around it. Today I'm going to show you what Jung actually discovered about the mechanics of personal vibration, why everything you've been taught about raising it is keeping you stuck at a frequency that repels what you want, and the specific psychological process that creates a shift so fundamental that your external reality begins reflecting it almost immediately. Not through magical thinking, through a transformation so real that even Jung was startled by how quickly the outer world responded to genuine inner change. To understand what Jung meant by vibration, you have to abandon the watered-down version the spiritual industry sells. Jung wasn't talking about feelings or moods or emotional states you could manufacture through willpower. He was describing something far more structural, the total energetic output of your psyche, the sum of everything you are, including and especially the parts you've hidden, denied, and buried. Your vibration isn't what you project, it's what you are, and those two things in most people are devastatingly different. Jung observed that every person broadcasts a psychological frequency that others detect unconsciously. You've felt this yourself. You meet someone who says all the right things, performs confidence and warmth, but something feels off. You can't explain it. Their words are fine. Their smile is fine. But your nervous system is picking up a different signal underneath. That signal is their actual vibration. The frequency generated by the totality of their psyche, not the curated version they're presenting. This is why performing positivity doesn't work. You can say affirmations all day, you can force gratitude, you can smile until your face hurts. But if your shadow is full of unprocessed rage, grief, shame, and terror, that material is broadcasting constantly underneath your performance. And everyone around you, whether they know it or not, is responding to the broadcast, not the performance. Reality itself responds to the broadcast, not to what you are pretending to be, to what you actually are. Jung called this the problem of the divided psyche. Most people are split. They've constructed a conscious identity, what Jung called the persona, built from qualities they've decided are acceptable: positive, kind, spiritual, generous, calm. And they've pushed everything that contradicts that identity into the shadow: their anger, their selfishness, their sexuality, their grief, their hunger for power, their capacity for cruelty. They've decided these parts don't exist, but those parts don't disappear just because you refuse to look at them. They keep broadcasting, and the signal they send is far stronger than the signal your persona projects. Think about someone who performs constant positivity. They smile through everything. They never express anger. They redirect every conversation toward gratitude and light. On the surface, this person seems high vibration. But Jung would see something different. he'd see someone whose shadow is enormous precisely because they've been feeding it every rejected emotion for years. That shadow isn't silent, it's screaming. And the scream creates a frequency of inauthenticity that repels genuine connection, real opportunity, and the very reality shifts the person desperately wants. This is why so many spiritual people feel stuck. They're doing everything right according to what they've been taught. High vibration diet, high vibration thoughts, high vibration environment. But their actual frequency hasn't changed because they haven't touched the material generating most of their signal. They've polished the surface while the foundation rots. And reality responds to foundations, not surfaces. Jung discovered that genuine vibration, the kind that actually alters your relationship with reality, comes from one source only: wholeness, not perfection, not positivity, not transcendence. Wholeness. The integration of everything you are into a single unified field of being. Light and dark, strength and vulnerability, love and rage, compassion and ruthlessness. When a person stops splitting themselves into acceptable and unacceptable parts and instead claims the full spectrum of who they are, something extraordinary happens to their energetic output. The frequency becomes coherent. Instead of broadcasting two contradictory signals, the persona saying one thing and the shadow screaming another, the person broadcasts a single, unified signal. And that coherence is what creates the shift people describe as raised vibration. It's not that you've eliminated the dark, it's that you've stopped fighting it. The war inside you ends. And the energy that was consumed by that internal war becomes available for everything else. Jung documented this transformation repeatedly. Patients who'd spent years performing goodness while suppressing their shadow were exhausted, stuck, attracting the same painful patterns. But when they began the terrifying process of acknowledging what they had buried, something shifted, not slowly, almost immediately. Their relationships changed, their opportunities changed. People responded to them differently. Circumstances that had been locked suddenly opened, as if reality had been waiting for them to become real before it would reorganize. This wasn't mysticism in Jung's view, it was psychology. When you stop broadcasting contradictory signals, the world can finally read you clearly. When you stop performing a version of yourself, people can finally connect with who you actually are. When your conscious identity and your unconscious reality align, you stop sabotaging yourself in ways you couldn't see. Because the sabotage was coming from shadow material you refused to acknowledge. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The reason most people's vibration stays stuck isn't because they're not trying hard enough. It's because the very things they're trying, the positivity, the gratitude, the light-focused practices, are actually feeding the split that keeps their frequency incoherent. Every time you force a positive thought to override a genuine feeling, you're widening the gap between your persona and your shadow. Every time you practice gratitude while ignoring legitimate grief, you're strengthening the broadcast from your unconscious that says something is deeply wrong here. Jung would say that genuine high vibration requires the opposite of what you've been taught. Instead of reaching for the light, you have to descend into the dark. Instead of avoiding negativity, you have to feel it fully. Instead of performing peace, you have to confront the war inside you, because the war is what's generating your stuck frequency, and no amount of positive thinking can override an internal civil war. The descent is what Jung called shadow work, and he was clear that it wasn't optional for anyone who wanted genuine transformation. You have to go into the parts of yourself you've rejected and reclaim them. Not act on them recklessly. Not become your shadow. But acknowledge that these qualities exist in you, understand why you rejected them, and integrate them into your conscious identity so they stop controlling you from the basement of your psyche. Imagine someone who spent their entire life being nice, never expressing anger, always accommodating, always putting others first. Their persona is the helpful one, the gentle one, the selfless one. But underneath, their shadow is full of rage at being taken advantage of, resentment at never having their needs met, hunger for power they've never allowed themselves to claim. That shadow material is broadcasting constantly, and it's attracting exactly the people and situations that trigger it, the takers, the users, the people who sense that this person won't push back. When this person begins shadow integration, when they finally allow themselves to feel the rage, to acknowledge the resentment, to claim their right to take up space, something dramatic happens. Their frequency shifts because the signal becomes coherent. They're no longer broadcasting helplessness underneath performed strength. They're broadcasting genuine power that includes the capacity for both gentleness and ferocity. And reality responds. The takers disappear. New people appear who can meet them as equals. Opportunities arise that match their actual capacity rather than their diminished self-presentation. This is what people mean when they talk about reality shifting, but they've been taught to create the shift from the outside through thoughts and practices and environmental changes. Jung showed that the shift only happens from the inside, through the brutal honesty of confronting what you've been hiding from yourself. And when it happens from the inside, the outside reorganization isn't gradual, it's startling in its speed. And that's exactly what this process demands of you, a willingness to stop performing and start being honest about every part of who you are. If that resonates, if you're feeling the pull toward that kind of radical self-confrontation, our guide True Self-Discovery offers 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's teachings, designed to take you into the depths you've been avoiding and help you find your way back whole. You'll find the link below, but the journey we're on here isn't finished yet, because understanding that shadow work shifts your vibration is only the beginning. The question is how it actually works in practice. Jung identified 3 specific mechanisms through which integration creates what people experience as instant reality shifts. Understanding these mechanisms transforms shadow work from abstract concept to practical tool. The first mechanism is signal coherence. As long as your psyche is split, broadcasting one message consciously and another unconsciously, reality receives contradictory instructions from you. You consciously want abundance, but unconsciously believe you don't deserve it. You consciously want love, but unconsciously expect abandonment. You consciously pursue success, but unconsciously sabotage every opportunity that gets close. These contradictions aren't character flaws. They're the natural result of a divided psyche. Your conscious desires pull in one direction, while your shadow programming pulls in another. And reality, responding to both signals simultaneously, produces exactly what you'd expect from contradictory instructions. Chaos, stuckness, patterns that repeat no matter what you try consciously to change. And when you integrate shadow material, the contradictions resolve, not because you've eliminated the shadow belief, but because you've made it conscious. You can see it now, and once you see it, it stops operating as an invisible counter-signal. You might still carry the wound that says you don't deserve abundance, but now you're aware of it. You can feel it activate without being controlled by it. Your conscious mind and your unconscious mind are no longer at war. The signal becomes coherent, and reality receives clear instructions for the first time. Jung documented patients who experienced dramatic external changes within weeks of achieving this coherence. Not because they manifested anything, because they stopped unconsciously blocking what was already trying to reach them. The opportunities had been there, the right people had been nearby, but the contradictory signal was repelling them. Remove the contradiction, and what belongs to you can finally arrive. The second mechanism is what Jung called energetic availability. Internal conflict consumes enormous psychological energy. When you're suppressing rage, that suppression requires constant effort. When you're denying grief, that denial demands energy every moment. When you're performing a persona that contradicts your actual nature, maintaining that performance is exhausting. Most of the fatigue people attribute to life circumstances is actually generated by internal warfare. Jung observed that patients who completed significant shadow integration experienced a surge of energy that seemed disproportionate to what they had done. They hadn't changed their diet, their exercise, their sleep patterns. They'd simply stopped fighting themselves. And the energy that had been consumed by that fight, years or decades of suppression and performance, was suddenly available for living. This energetic shift was visible to others. People would comment that the person seemed different, more alive, more present, more magnetic. Not because they'd adopted some high vibration practice, but because they had liberated the energy that was trapped in maintaining their internal division. That liberated energy changed how they moved through the world, how they spoke, how they occupied space, and it changed how reality responded to them, because they were finally showing up with their full capacity rather than the fraction left over after internal war consumed most of it. You've seen this in people who have been through genuine transformation, not the performed kind where someone adopts spiritual language and practices serenity. The real kind where someone faces something devastating about themselves and comes through it. There's a quality to those people that's unmistakable, a solidity, a presence, a warmth that doesn't need to perform warmth, because it's generated by genuine wholeness rather than manufactured positivity. That quality is coherent vibration, and you can feel the difference between that and someone forcing themselves to seem evolved. The third mechanism is unconscious attraction patterns. Jung discovered that your shadow doesn't just broadcast internally. It creates a magnetic field that draws specific people, situations, and circumstances toward you. Whatever you've rejected in yourself, you'll encounter externally. Whatever you've denied, reality will present to you again and again until you face it. This is why patterns repeat. The person who suppresses their anger attracts people who express anger explosively. The person who denies their need for control attracts chaotic situations. The person who rejects their vulnerability attracts people who exploit vulnerability, not as punishment. As mirror, reality is showing you what you refuse to see in yourself. When you integrate shadow material, these attraction patterns shift immediately, not gradually. The magnetic field changes because the charge that was drawing specific patterns has been neutralized through conscious acknowledgement. You stop attracting the mirror because you no longer need external reality to show you what you're now willing to see internally. Jung documented this with a precision that surprised even him. A patient integrates their suppressed rage, and suddenly the rage-provoking people in their life either change their behavior or disappear entirely. A patient acknowledges their need for control, and chaotic situations stop manifesting. A patient claims their vulnerability, and exploitative relationships end without dramatic confrontation, as if reality was waiting for the internal shift before reorganizing the external landscape. This is the mechanism behind what people call instant reality shifts. It's not magical, it's magnetic. You change the internal charge, and the external field reorganizes around the new frequency. But you can't fake the internal change. You can't think your way to it. You can't affirm your way to it. You have to actually go into the shadow, face what's there, feel it fully, and integrate it. The shortcut everyone wants doesn't exist. The long way through your own darkness is the only path that actually changes the frequency. Jung also identified what he called the individuation threshold, a specific point in the integration process where the shift becomes unmistakable. Before this threshold, the work feels internal. You're processing emotions, recognizing patterns, understanding yourself better. Valuable, but the external world hasn't noticeably changed. Then you cross the threshold, and suddenly the external world starts responding differently to you in ways you can't attribute to coincidence. The threshold, Jung observed, arrives when you stop trying to become a better version of yourself and instead accept the version you actually are. This sounds simple, but it's psychologically devastating. Because accepting yourself completely means accepting qualities you find repulsive, your capacity for manipulation, your genuine selfishness, your darkness that isn't just shadow projected onto you by others, but darkness that actually belongs to you. Most people pursue self-improvement as a way to avoid self-acceptance. They want to fix themselves into something acceptable rather than accept themselves as they actually are, including the unacceptable parts. Jung saw this as the fundamental trap, because as long as you're trying to improve yourself into acceptability, you're reinforcing the split. You're saying some parts of me are okay and other parts need to be eliminated. And that stance, no matter how it disguises itself as growth, keeps the psyche divided and the vibration incoherent. The individuation threshold is crossed when improvement stops and acceptance begins. When you look at your full self, every shadow quality, every wound, every capacity you wish you didn't have, and you say, "This is me, all of it. I'm not going to perform a version that excludes the parts I'm ashamed of. I'm going to be whole, even though wholeness includes darkness." That moment of acceptance is what generates the frequency shift, because for the first time, you're not broadcasting from a divided self. You're broadcasting from a unified one. And a unified self has a coherence that divided selves cannot achieve, regardless of how many spiritual practices they stack on top of their division. Jung warned that crossing this threshold costs you nearly everything you thought you wanted. Your relationships built on performance will collapse because you can no longer perform. Your identity built on being the good one, the spiritual one, the evolved one will dissolve because you've acknowledged that you're also the dark one, the selfish one, the wounded one. The community that validated your persona will reject your wholeness because your wholeness makes them uncomfortable about their own division. This is why most people stop short of the threshold. The cost seems too high. Losing relationships, losing identity, losing belonging. They'd rather stay at a frequency that doesn't work but feels safe than cross into the territory where everything changes but nothing is guaranteed. And Jung understood this resistance. He never minimized the cost, but he also documented what waited on the other side for those brave enough to cross. On the other side of the threshold, reality reorganizes, not as metaphor, as observable fact. Jung watched patients lose relationships that were based on their false self and gain relationships that could hold their real self. Watch them lose opportunities aligned with their persona and attract opportunities aligned with their actual nature. Watch their health change, their energy change, their presence change, all because the signal became coherent and the universe could finally respond to who they actually were, rather than who they had been pretending to be. The speed of this reorganization is what makes people call it instant. But it's not truly instant. The internal work takes time, sometimes months, sometimes years. But the external response to the completion of that work can be startlingly fast, as if reality had a backlog of responses waiting for you to become real enough to receive them. As if everything you wanted had been sitting in a holding pattern, circling, waiting for your frequency to become coherent enough to land. This is what Jung meant when he spoke about synchronicity in the context of individuation, the meaningful coincidences that accelerate when someone is genuinely integrating, the right person appearing at the right moment, the opportunity emerging from nowhere, the obstacle dissolving without effort. These aren't rewards for good behavior. They're the natural consequence of coherent vibration finally being readable by the field of reality that's been trying to respond to you all along. But Jung was also honest about a paradox at the center of this process. You can't pursue wholeness as a strategy to get what you want. If you're doing shadow work because you want reality to shift, you're still operating from the divided self that treats inner work as a means to external ends. The integration has to be genuine. You have to actually want to know yourself, not as a tool for manifestation, but as the fundamental purpose of being alive. The people whose reality shifted most dramatically in Jung's observation were the ones who stopped caring about reality shifting. They weren't doing shadow work to attract abundance or find love or create success. They were doing it because they couldn't tolerate their own inauthenticity anymore. They were doing it because the weight of performing had become heavier than the fear of being real. They were doing it because something inside them demanded truth, even at the cost of comfort. And it was precisely this orientation, doing the work for its own sake rather than for results, that created the deepest coherence and the most dramatic external reorganization. Because pursuing wholeness as a manifestation technique is just another form of division. It's the ego using shadow work the same way it used affirmations, as a strategy to control reality rather than surrender to truth. Jung would tell you that the real invitation isn't to raise your vibration, it's to stop fragmenting it. Stop splitting yourself into light and dark, acceptable and unacceptable, spiritual and human. Stop performing a frequency you think the universe wants to hear, and instead broadcast the raw, complete, terrifying truth of everything you actually are. That broadcast, the one that includes your wounds and your power, your gentleness and your rage, your love and your hunger, your compassion and your capacity for destruction, that broadcast is your actual vibration. And it's already whole. You've just been jamming the signal by rejecting half of it. The work isn't to build something new. It's to stop suppressing what's already there, to stop censoring your own frequency, to let the full spectrum of who you are transmit without apology, without performance, without the exhausting filtration system you've been running since childhood, when you first learned that parts of you were unacceptable. When you stop filtering, the signal clarifies. When the signal clarifies, reality can respond. When reality responds to the real you instead of the performed you, everything changes. Not because you've manifested anything, because you've finally stopped blocking what was already trying to reach you. This is what Jung spent his life documenting, not a technique for getting what you want, a process for becoming who you are. And the stunning revelation at the end of that process is that who you actually are, whole, integrated, shadow, and light unified, is the frequency that reality has been waiting for all along. You don't need to raise it. You need to stop diminishing it. You need to stop cutting pieces off to make yourself palatable. You need to stop performing a version of high vibration, while your actual frequency screams from the basement where you've locked it. Let the whole signal through, the dark and the light, the wound and the power, the grief and the joy. Let all of it broadcast simultaneously without trying to curate the transmission. That's coherence. That's what creates the shift. That's what Jung meant when he described individuation as the most powerful transformation a human being can undergo. Not transcendence, not ascension, not raising yourself above your humanity, but descending so fully into your humanity that you become the complete instrument you were always meant to be. An instrument that doesn't play one note and suppress the others. An instrument that plays the full chord, every frequency at once, dissonance and harmony together, creating a sound so whole that the universe recognizes it as truth and reorganizes accordingly. Your vibration isn't something you build, it's something you unleash, and the only thing standing between you and the frequency that shifts reality is your willingness to stop rejecting the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. Jung dedicated his life to showing people that the gold they were looking for wasn't above them in some spiritual stratosphere. It was below them, buried in the shadow, waiting in the dark, wrapped in everything they were afraid to face. Go get it. Not by reaching up, by reaching in, into the grief you've been avoiding, into the rage you've been suppressing, into the hunger you've been denying, into the parts of you that don't fit the spiritual image you've been curating. That's where your real frequency lives. That's where the vibration that shifts reality has been hiding. And it's been waiting this entire time for you to stop pretending it doesn't exist and finally let it sing. If you felt that pull to stop performing and start descending, if something in you is ready to face what you've been filtering out, our guide, True Self-Discovery, gives you 24 reflection exercises drawn from Jung's own framework, each one designed to help you reclaim what you've rejected and find your way back to the wholeness that was always yours. The link is right below. True self-discovery. Because the frequency that changes everything has been inside you all along. You just have to stop being afraid of it.